3 months after that tenant moves into the property, they slip in the bathtub and they seriously injure themselves because there's soapstone all over the bathtub. Whose fault is that? Is that me, the landlord's fault?
This is episode number 28 of the Short-Term Rental Success Stories podcast. Hey, what is going on, Host Nation? I am just so grateful for everybody that was leaving so many awesome, nice reviews. Congratulations to our winners, Amy, Cameron, and Bethany on the vacation giveaway. That is so awesome. You guys are going to some cool places like Las Vegas and Orlando. So I am super excited. I'm planning on going over to Tennessee pretty soon for an event, a Bigger Pockets event. So if anybody is going to be going to the Bigger Pockets event this coming, I think it's beginning of October. It's like October 4th through the 9th or something. I'm going to be there. It'll be so cool. If you are going to be going there, shoot me a message. I'd love to be able to meet up and talk, and that'd be just so cool to meet some more people of the Host Nation family. But we are going to be doing another giveaway, guys, because we are reaching a big milestone. We are at around 900 members right now, and we're approaching that 1,000 mark. So we're getting so many people every single day. Like, it's just growing so fast that I wanted to be able to do something, give back for the milestone. So we're going to be doing another vacation giveaway. So in order for this one, just go to shorttermsage.com/giveaway. We're going to be giving away some awesome vacations to either like Las Vegas again, Orlando, because those ones are popular, Myrtle Beach, or Daytona Beach. So these ones are all going to be within the US. We're going to be giving this to 3 people. If you are interested in participating, go to shorttermsage.com/giveaway for more instructions. This is going to be going on until we reach that 1,000 mark, but I imagine that this is going to be very quickly by the end of the week. Once we reach that 1,000, I'm going to announce who the winners are, and you guys can pick wherever you want to go from these destinations. So thank you so much, everybody that has been contributing and commenting in the group, and we have some really cool stuff going. If you don't already know, John Bell and I, we have another podcast called Vacation Rental Machine, and we're actually looking to, now that there's a good amount of engagement in the group and a lot more questions being asked, we're actually going to start doing some live Q&As, get in the community, helping people out, because that's what we want to do. We're not just doing this other podcast just to give you education, but we're looking to help teach people how to be able to operate their vacation rentals. So some really cool stuff coming, guys. So if you haven't done so, go to the Host Nation Facebook group, participate in the giveaway. We do some fun stuff in there. We're going to be doing weekly Q&As and doing some live stuff. So this will actually end up being another podcast episode on Vacation Rental Machine. So awesome stuff. But let's go into Darren Pettyjohn, because today I had the honor of speaking with the one and only Mr. Darren Pettyjohn, founder of Proper Vacation Rental Insurance. So Darren founded Proper at the end of 2014 and is now servicing over 30,000 hosts in all 50 states, with plans to move to Canada and the Caribbean in the near future. This episode is going to be one of my top favorites because Darren just lays out so much knowledge, and not just on insurance information, but key things that you need to know if you plan on operating a business in general. Now, Proper isn't just in the business of insurance, but also education. So if you want to support the show and speak with an agent from Proper, because there's a lot of information in this episode, guys, that, there's just so much in there, but a lot of the things that I bring up, maybe they bring up more questions to you. So if you do have any other questions that you want answered, then go to shorttermsage.com/proper. That's PROPER. They can speak with you for free. Darren says that, sometimes people call on 45 minutes just answering questions. So that's like a whole podcast episode right there. And those are your questions that get to be answered. But we cover a lot of really good things in here, some really awesome points that maybe you didn't even realize going into this. So definitely one of my favorite episodes. I know that you guys are going to enjoy this. If you want my show notes for this episode, my success secrets, the things that I've taken away, then go to shorttermsage.com/STR28. Or if you'd like to sign up for the email, then go to shorttermsage.com/show notes. With all that being said, on to this week's conversation. Hey, welcome back, Host Nation, to another episode of Short-Term Rental Success Stories. In this episode, we have the special honor of speaking with the man himself, Mr. Darren Pettyjohn, the co-founder of Proper Insurance, Proper being one of the leaders in vacation rental insurance. I'm sure that you've heard of them, but if you haven't, this is going to be a really good episode because we're going to be diving into what Proper is, what it covers, the differences between your regular, and just a whole lot of really good information. So Darren, would you please introduce yourself and let the audience know who you are and what inspired you to start this company?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Darren Pettyjohn, and as as you were told there, we founded Proper Insurance at the end of 2014, and I've had the pleasure of being in the insurance industry for the most part my entire professional career, which is about 15, 17 years now. And with the explosive growth of Airbnb and Vrbo, we really saw an opportunity to come in and become a market leader specifically for these short-term rental properties, because there's a lot of gaps in coverage, which I'm sure we will get into later. But I'm proud to say that the program's been going for over 4 full years now, and we've written over 30,000 insurance policies in 4 years in all 50 states. So it's pretty incredible.
Now, your guys' growth, because you guys are a relatively newer company, your guys' growth, has that just been really organic word of mouth, or how have you guys been able to expand so quickly?
Yeah, great question. And in the beginning, like any entrepreneur, it was myself at my home with a cell phone waiting for it to ring, of course. And really where we started to grow was with professional property managers. So we know that the Vacasas of the world, who manage 15,000 rentals, all the way to the small mom and pop professional manager who has 50, they're a great lead source. And insurance has always been a friction point for them when they're dealing with their owners, onboarding new clients, State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, USAA, go on down the list. Every carrier treats short-term rentals differently, especially the last 5 years. And so we really just started contacting property managers throughout the country and mailing them packets to let them know that we had a product available to their owners. And then obviously we have a big internet push, like most people, a lot of organic traffic through the internet as well as paid advertising. We sponsor a lot of local and national shows and are part of a lot of organizations. And then, as I tell any business owner, your best referral is the clients that you already have. So we actually circle back to all of our clients and honestly ask them for referrals, because we sell a very unique product, and it's been kind of just a snowball, honestly, for the last 4 years.
Now, I imagine in the space, vacation rental insurance is probably got a lot more headache to it. What is the difference between maybe regular homeowners insurance versus vacation rental insurance?
Yeah, of course, another great question. And that really fundamentally is the fundamental question of our entire product. And the easiest way to explain it would be, how much do you charge for insurance premium? So most people who own a home have a homeowner's insurance policy. If you own a business, you have a business insurance policy. If you own a long-term rental property like myself, you would have what's called a dwelling landlord policy. Those can vary from $500 a year to $5,000 a year. And when you fill out your request for a quote from your agent or the company, they ask you questions like, how big is your house? So if it burns down, we need to rebuild it. How old is your roof? What type of construction does it have? All these types of questions go into the premium. So obviously a 5,000 square foot house is going to be much more expensive to insure than a 500 square foot condo. But when you flip over to the short-term vacation rental side, it's not so simple, because there's a lot of moving parts. You're essentially turning a normal dwelling, if you will, into a mini hotel where you have guests coming and going, which dramatically changes not only the property coverage, because there is damage to the property and could be to the property itself, but really the liability as well. If someone's injured in that property and they sue the owner. So virtually all of those policies, you only have three options. So let's use an example. Let's just say you own a single family home and you want to turn it into a short-term rental property. You can insure it on a homeowner's policy. You can insure it on a dwelling landlord, or you could essentially insure it as a business. The issue is there's gaps in coverage in all three of those insurance policies. You really need a piece of each policy. There's aspects you need a homeowner's, fire coverage, wind, hail, the normal stuff you think of that insurance would cover. You need components of the landlord policy from a liability perspective. And then you need components of a business policy, because it's an income generating property. So you need to protect your income, liability, etc. So basically, what we did is we took components of all three of these insurance policies, wrapped them into one comprehensive policy that a short-term rental owner can purchase. Again, not easy to do. We've learned a lot over the years. We've made minor adjustments to the policy, and I can say though that we do. I know all of our competitors, and we do have the most comprehensive product a short-term rental owner can purchase. So that's kind of a 30,000-foot view on what you need as a short-term rental owner.
Now, you said that you started in 2014, so a little bit after Airbnb started gaining a lot more popularity. What about this type of insurance, though, would make you want to go into something? Because it does seem like it is a lot more complicated, a lot more moving pieces. Like you said, you're now operating like kind of like a mini hotel. So why not stick with regular insurance? Why jump into this very complex type of business model?
Well, there was a need for it. And the kind of $1 million exclusion from a homeowner's policy is it excludes business activity. So if you own a home and let's say you're a woodworker and you like building furniture at your house and you have a little shop in your garage and a client of yours comes over to your house to pick up a chair that you made for them. If they slip in the driveway and fall and get injured, because there's ice in your driveway and you didn't salt your driveway or something, and they sue you, your homeowner's insurance is not going to respond to that because that's considered a business activity. That bodily injury was in relation to business activity. You run into the same issue with a landlord policy. And then when you go to a business policy isn't designed to cover contents of a residence, so all of your personal property in the home and things like that. And really, there was just a need for it. It's what's called program insurance. So everybody should understand that there's commodity insurance and then there's niche insurance. So commodity insurance would be auto insurance, home insurance, life insurance, very, very cookie cutter insurance policies that virtually you can buy from any agent in the United States. Very competitively priced. Very comparable coverages. But then there are programs or niche insurance policies for a thing like a winery. Let's say you own a winery. Are you going to call your local agent and buy an insurance policy for your winery? The answer is no. You're going to use that agent to find a niche insurance program specifically tailored for wineries, whitewater rafting companies, bed and breakfast, and so on. And so the question was, is a short-term rental really a niche product? Does there even need to be a niche product for this industry? And the answer is yes, because there's so many gaps in these other policies. And, it was the move of a lifetime for me. I mean, you work your whole life and, you hope that you get one opportunity to really get into a really good business venture, and I'm fortunate, and we put it together.
Now, you were saying that this is a very niche type of policy, but people have been staying in other people's homes for centuries. People have been subletting their homes or just renting, long-term renting. So why haven't other insurance companies, major ones like, let's say, Geico or any other type of major home insurance company, provide short-term rental insurance?
Well, and that's an excellent question. And the reality is yes, short-term rental properties have been in Hawaii and the California coast and Florida and Martha's Vineyard and places forever. And they're mostly all insured on what's called a dwelling landlord policy. So a landlord, you're a landlord, and you have someone stay at your property, they sign a lease. And that product is how most people are insured across the U.S. on Airbnb. And it's not that it's entirely wrong. There is decent coverage in there. The issue was because of the internet and because of Airbnb and Vrbo, there are now short-term rental properties in every community across the United States. So these companies who had a good handle on the landlord exposure and should we deny a claim because it's a short-term rental or there's liability off premise, it just really was a non-issue. I mean, let's just call it what it is. They were fat and happy. Everybody's making money. It's a non-issue. But then all of a sudden, they're now insuring properties in urban areas and in small towns like where I live, Bozeman, Montana. There's 1,000 short-term rentals in our college town. And, when that happens, domestic insurance carriers get nervous because now there's all this new exposure. So they've come out a lot of different ways to address it. Some of them cancel it. They have a question: do you short-term rent your property? Others have written very inexpensive riders to a homeowner's policy that provide very limited coverage because they don't necessarily want to lose all this business. So it's an absolute battle out there on what's going on with the short-term rentals. But it comes down to exposure. And there just really wasn't that much exposure up until the phenomenon of Airbnb and Vrbo.
Now, what's the difference though from like a short-term rental insurance versus like a long-term rental? Because a long-term rental, you are still conducting a business. Like you said, if someone slips and falls, there's going to be some type of coverage for that. But what is the real difference between the two then?
So another great question. And the way to explain it from a liability standpoint is a dwelling landlord policy actually does exclude business activity. So the same thing, if you own a long-term rental, and let's say it's a duplex, and on one side you have a tenant, a college kid who rents it out, and on the other you have that woodworking shop that we talked about earlier, there's going to be no coverage for that woodworking shop because that's deemed a business. So the $1 million question is a short-term renting your property a business transaction or is it not? And that's still up for debate. I can tell you most owners, when they talk to us and our insureds, they agree it's a business. Look, I have to get a business permit. I file taxes differently. I do write-offs. There's no arguing it's not a business. So that's number one. It could just fundamentally be wrong from the beginning because you're kind of rolling the dice. Okay, if someone gets injured at my property and they sue me, is my landlord insurance carrier going to respond or not? That's a great question. So let's look at one liability example. Let's say you own a long-term rental like I do, and somebody signs a 1-year lease. And they say, I'm going to stay at the property for a year and pay $1,000 a month. Okay, great. 3 months after that tenant moves into the property, they slip in the bathtub and they seriously injure themselves because there's soap scum all over the bathtub. Whose fault is that? Is that me, the landlord's fault, that my tenant is too lazy to clean their bathtub and they fell and got injured in that property? No, of course it's not my responsibility. They're taking ownership of that possession of that property for 1 year. Now let's flip it and say a short-term rental guest checks into a property for 3 nights and they go to take a shower. They fall in the shower because there's soap scum all over the bathtub and they decide to sue the owner, the landlord. Is it the landlord's fault? You'd have a pretty good argument that it is because this person thought they were checking into a very clean, safe property, just like a hotel. So again, you've got confusion there. Is it a business? Is it not? Is it my liability? Is it not? And these are the kinds of issues you run into when your property is insured on a landlord policy. And really the biggest difference is the liability. So a landlord policy carries what's called premise liability. So any bodily injury or property damage that happens on that premise is covered. So a slip in the driveway, the roof collapses. The landlord is too cheap to fix the roof. It collapses and injures the tenant. Covered, covered, covered. Fall down the stairs, no railing, etc., etc. But what is some bodily injury that could happen off the premise that could be tied back to that short-term rental business? There's a lot of stuff. And the easiest example is a dog. So let's say you own a short-term rental, you don't allow dogs. but a guest decides to bring their dog to the rental for the weekend regardless. They go out and walk their dog, and their dog bites a kid in the neighborhood. The family not only sues the guest, but they also sue you because you own the property and you're the one that's allowing short-term rental guests to stay at your property. Well, guess what? That was bodily injury that you could be found liable for that happened off your property line that could be tied back to your business. There's simply no coverage under a landlord policy. The only way to have coverage for that incident would be to have commercial general liability, which is what we sell, and no animal or pet exclusion. So that was a long-winded answer, and there's a lot more things in a landlord policy. Loss of rents versus business income, backups of sewers and drains, and you really could go on down the list. But fundamentally, again, if you have a listener that has a dwelling landlord policy, which you have a lot, they really need to reconsider their insurance and ask the tough questions to their agent to go, look, I'm running a business. Why don't I have business insurance? This landlord thing makes me nervous.
No, and I think it was really good to kind of address the point that, your insurance is there to be able to protect your business. But you also mentioned something that was pretty key that maybe not a whole lot of people realize is that loss of income because you are operating a business. Do you mind explaining that a little bit and how proper is different from, let's say, your regular landlord or regular homeowners in the case of loss of income?
Yeah, so another great example, as you said, is the income that your property generates. So in a landlord policy, they have coverage that's labeled loss of rents. So again, I own long-term rental property here in Bozeman. If that property catches fire and it needs to be rebuilt, which is a covered insurance loss, I would be paid my loss of rent, okay? Now, that sounds great for a long-term rental, but really the coverage isn't that great because what happens is the insurance carrier pays you what's called fair market value of that rental property. So my rental is 1,500 square feet. It's a 3-bedroom property in a neighborhood. What they will do is they will look at all the comparable properties in my area, and they will determine what is the fair rental value in that area, and they will say it's $1,000 a month. Okay, great. And they will pay me an insurance claim of $1,000 a month while my home or my rental property is being rebuilt. That's issue one with a short-term rental because you make a lot more money short-term renting and you have seasonality. The second issue is it's capped at 12 months. And a lot of people don't know this, but we've been through the forest fires in California, in Sevier County, hurricanes. When you have a total loss on your property, you have to file an insurance claim. There's an investigation. There's permits to get. There's usually a shortage of labor in the area. It's actually 18 to 24 months until your property is actually fully back up and running to the level it was before the loss. So the fact that a landlord policy, one, pays fair market value and only pays for a 12-month period is a real gap in coverage. If you own a coffee shop, and your coffee shop burns down, do you want the insurance carrier to look at every other coffee shop in your town and say, well, the fair income value of every coffee shop is $10,000 a month when you when you have worked extremely hard to advertise your property, sell better coffee, and have a better customer experience? No. You don't. And so what we sell is what's called business income insurance, just like a coffee shop would have. And it's different in two ways. The first is we pay what's called actual loss sustained. So we will look at your past bookings, your future bookings. We take seasonality into effect, and we actually look at comparable short-term rental properties if you don't have the rental history. We actually had a couple clients in Tennessee that had just purchased short-term rentals, and a month later, all of them burned down in the Gatlinburg fires. So we obviously look at comparable properties and say, we can't take your financial history. We need to take comparable financial history. So number one, you get paid what you're actually losing. And number two, there is no time limit on the business income. You're only subject to the limit that you choose in your policy. So fundamentally, kind of the same. They look the same on paper, loss of income, business income, but completely different when it comes to claims time.
No, that's really good that you address that, the difference. I think that's pretty key that maybe a lot of people don't realize. I want to go back because we have a lot of really diverse group of listeners. Some of them are property managers, some of them are into rental arbitrage, co-hosting. How does proper and vacation rental insurance work if you are a property manager, though? And going back to that example where you have someone that slips in the tub, where does it fall, the liability? Does it fall on the property owner? Does it fall on the property manager? Where does that kind of lie?
It's a great question. And when that happens, so we'll just keep it simple, and there's a slip and fall in the bathtub. Not only is the owner of the property going to be sued for the bodily injury, but the professional property manager as well. And most of your listeners, if they've been in the business for a long time, they've probably been involved in something like this. And it's unfortunate because it just happens. But it really makes sense, too, because the property manager is the one managing the property. Again, who's supposed to be cleaning the bathtub? It's just the way lawsuits work, though. The person on the deed, whoever owns the property, is getting sued no matter what. And then the property manager gets tied in as well. So the way that it works is, if you're a professional property manager and you manage, let's say, 100 homes, you have what's called a business owner's insurance policy. That's going to cover the equipment at your location, slip and falls at your location. You may have E&O insurance. You might have work comp, obviously, if you have workers. You have kind of this package policy for your business. The problem with it is the liability, which is the bodily injury that you could be found liable for, does not extend to the properties that you manage. So in that example, if you were pulled into a suit, your business insurance is not going to respond on your behalf. It ends at all these property lines. So how do you get coverage? Been in the industry forever, and most of your PMs and property managers will be familiar with this, but it's called getting additionally insured onto the owner's insurance policy. So when property managers onboard new clients or they renew contracts with current owners, one of the things in their rental agreement is that the owner carries the right insurance, hopefully. They usually require some type of liability, and then that the property manager is added as additionally insured onto that policy. And we actually automatically add every PM onto our policies that are professionally managed. And we've had lots of claims and some open claims right now where property managers are being covered under our insurance policy. Happens all the time.
Now, Darren, how does this work now, though? Because with Airbnb, they rolled out this new co-hosting. So basically, anybody is coming in. They're basically being like a property manager in a sense. How does that work if you are maybe just temporarily managing something, or if you don't have like a professional property management company and you're just maybe starting off with like a property that you're co-hosting, maybe like co-hosting for a friend or someone else?
Yeah, and the word co-host, I assume you mean as sort of the rental arbitrage model or the re-rent type model. Define
Co-hosting, like if I wanted to manage your property for you, not subleasing. This is the split income where you get like a property management percentage.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and I get it. I like the word co-host because it fits nicely in the Airbnb sort of ecosystem. But being a co-host is no different than being a property manager. The way that you structure your payment might be where you say, hey, let me host your property, co-host for you, and I will split the commissions with you. Or I will rent the property from you for $1,000 and I'll take anything above that, or however you want to split it up. But at the end of the day, the person that is co-hosting the property is managing that property. They're advertising it. They're doing the key exchange or delivering the code to the rental. They're potentially cleaning the property or outsourcing the cleaning of the property. Somebody is overseeing the management of this property. And call it what it is, but it's professional management. So if you're in a co-host environment, it'd be no different than the property manager, because at the end of the day, someone owns the property, right? Whoever owns it needs to have the right insurance. And when you go into a co-host opportunity where you say, look, I would like to co-host your property. Here's the outline of how it's going to work. Okay, some part of that onboarding process, we need to talk about insurance. And you need to contact your agent and make sure everything's on the up and up. And then usually the agent will come back and go, well, we don't cover Airbnb, or you need to do this, you need to do that. Regardless, the co-host needs to be added as additionally insured onto that insurance policy. That's option one. That's the most up and up way to do it. The other option would be what we call re-rent policies. So we have a lot of people, and I believe it's called the arbitrage model. There's a lot of different words for it. But what happens is companies or individuals will long-term rent properties, and then they will turn around and short-term rent them on Airbnb. It's been happening, and we write a lot of those insurance policies. So what we do is we write a commercial renter's insurance policy, which is basically $500 a year. It's inexpensive, $50 a month for insurance, and that will cover your income, just like we talked about. You have a vested interest, you need to protect the income if there's water damage or something. Your contents, because usually you will furnish the property, and then the big one is obviously the liability. So 2 ways to do that as a co-host. You could be very upfront with the owner. Look, you need to contact your carrier. You need to do this. We need this a partnership. Let's work it out together. Or you can just go out on your own and purchase a co-host / re-rent and business commercial renters insurance policy from Proper. And what I advise your listeners to do is to call us because we work through all these different scenarios, and there's a lot of them.
Now, I want to hit on what is the difference between Proper and maybe some of these other major vacation rental type of insurance companies. Are you guys doing something different, or is it all basically the same? How do you compare? Like what would be a good vacation rental company to go with?
There's really two markets. So there's the big domestic market, which is one is the landlord policies, and we've kind of covered that. And they're not really doing anything to address the short-term rental aspect of it. In fact, there is a article that we send around a lot about a guy who has a landlord policy, and then he had some guests throw a party at his house, $13,000 in damage. And the policy that he has is specifically branded for short-term rentals. It says right on there, short-term rental use. And he thought he was covered. Everything was good. He filed the claim, no coverage. So you go, whoa, well, how can there not be any coverage? Again, landlord says short-term rental. Fundamentally, when you short-term rent your property, you are entrusting that property to someone else. You're saying, here are the keys. You take ownership and take care of it for 3 days, and then you pay me $1,000. Okay, great. Well, when you entrust your property to someone else, there simply is no coverage for intentional acts or vandalism of that property. So unless your contract is specifically endorsed, there's just no coverage. The guy who went out and did this big news article in Atlanta on it, was very upset because he felt like, man, I bought a specific policy for short-term rentals. There's just big gaps in coverage. I mean, had the house burned down, would it be covered? Probably. Could they deny the claim? I mean, who knows? But looking at it from a 30,000-foot view, there's a lot of domestic carriers that are just patching leaky rafts. Honestly, I'm not trying to say we're the only one out there that does it on this level. But we really are. And to give you a couple examples, let's talk about liquor. So liquor is excluded from virtually all insurance policies, but the exclusion specifically states the furnishing or contributing of alcohol. So you may have a lot of listeners out there that say, well, wait a second, I don't furnish alcohol at my short-term rental. Why do I need liquor coverage? Here's the reality. Short-term rental guests drink on vacation, and the alcohol that they decide not to consume, they leave at the short-term rental property. So unless you can 100% say that my post-stay inspection cleaning goes through every cupboard, every drawer and looks under every bed to make certain there's no alcohol in this rental when the next group checks in. Well, guess what? If they miss it, you've now furnished alcohol. And if a group comes in there and they have a kid that finds a bottle of whiskey in the cupboard and drinks it and gets hit by a car, it's over. So what does Proper do? We actually entirely remove the liquor exclusion from our insurance policy, which not only protects you for that example, but also if you want to leave a 6-pack of beer, a couple bottles of wine, etc., we allow for that. So again, I don't want to say we're the only one, but there's a lot of people below us who are kind of fighting for this business, and they all have weaknesses on some level. I mean, I can tell you right now, we're the only company that removes the liquor exclusion, period, end of story. We're the only company that provides bed bug business income coverage. It's pretty cool, actually, up to $15,000 with no deductible. No other carrier in the United States offers that, but we're more expensive than anybody. So not everybody wants to buy our insurance because it's very expensive, but I can tell you most people want the education regardless, and then they can decide, well, you know what? I've got a landlord policy. It's $1,000 less than Proper. I don't think someone's going to bring a dog. I don't think someone's going to furnish alcohol. I don't think I'm going to get bed bugs, and on and on and on. Well, then they have a choice, but they need to be educated on what do I have and what do I not have. And that's what we do at our company. We just educate and then let you decide whether you want to upgrade your coverage.
No, I think you brought up a really good point, Darren, that short-term renters, these operators that are getting into the space, they're coming up with some really creative and unique ways to be able to attract people to their rentals. Now, let's say, like, I had a guest on the show that they were actually cooking for people. Like, they would leave food in their fridge, and the guests that would stay there would eat. Now, let's say someone gets sick and they now they're going to sue because, like, they have a peanut allergy or whatever. How does that work when people are doing something that is different? If they're providing chocolates, if they're providing liquor, if they're providing food, or like bike amenities, stuff like that, where you're incorporating other aspects of a business into that.
Only way that they're going to have coverage is with commercial general liability without a communicable disease exclusion and other types of exclusions, 100%. So what that is that's actually, that's a bed and breakfast. I mean, you're serving food to people. Imagine what restaurants have to go through. It's absolutely crazy. Whoever is doing that is literally completely rolling the dice with their financial future, unless they have business liability and they have an email from their insurance carrier that says, yes, it's okay to provide food to guests. So we allow certain levels, but we underwrite. There's certain people who leave a basket and they leave a couple bottles of wine, and we're okay with it. But the beauty is the online listing allows us to have a snapshot into each property we insure, which is key and part of the only reason we can do this. But for your future previous podcasts, for Airbnb guests who are doing that, they are absolutely out of their mind to be doing that unless they know they have insurance coverage. I mean, that's scary stuff.
Now, I want to roll into, because a lot of hosts host in their own home. I rent out a basement unit. So let's say though, if someone is just staying in a room and they go into the kitchen and they eat some of the food from the fridge because they say, hey, you can help yourself to, maybe some snacks or whatever. Where does the line cross with that?
Again, you have to ask your insurance carrier, is there coverage for this or is there not? Is there an exclusion in my policy for this? And most carriers, if you were to write them an email and say, hey, I have a question. I'm renting out my basement and I allow my short-term rental guests to eat food and drink coffee from my kitchen, they're going to cancel your insurance. They're going to say, we had no idea this was the exposure that was going on at your property, et cetera, et cetera. But you need to dig into the fine details about the exclusions. Because if they come back and say, look, we sold you a home sharing endorsement, it gives you $10,000 in property coverage, which is pretty minimal, but it doesn't address the liability at all. Whoa, okay, I just realized, well, now I know it was only $100 a year, because all it's doing is giving me property coverage. There's no endorsement to the liability aspect of it. So bottom line is you need answers in writing from your insurance carrier. and ask these tough questions. That's a great example. Yeah, someone gets sick and they go to the hospital and they sue me. Do I have coverage? That's a great question to ask your insurance carrier.
Now, what about for those people that do host in their own home? Let's say it's not on the short-term rental side, but like, what if it's on my side? Let's say I accidentally leave the kitchen stove on and the house burns down. Is my short-term rental insurance going to cover that if it was not due to a guest or if it was like a separate part of the house?
Good question again, and it all depends on the insurance carrier interpretation. And there's a section in every insurance policy that basically states if there is any misrepresentation or misleading information regarding this property and this policy, then we reserve the right to void coverage. And so you have to be very, very careful on, people think they're flying under the radar, and I don't want to tell my agent because I haven't been canceled. Well, so here's a great example. There's another public story out there about a gal who is suing Travelers Insurance for denying her insurance claim in relation to Airbnb. So the way that it was set up is she owns a home and she has a guest house. A tree fell on her guest house and damaged it, $80,000 in damage. That's covered under all home insurance. It's one of the reasons you have insurance. The adjuster came to her house and started asking questions and found out that her guest house was rented on Airbnb for 14 nights, actually. That's it. She booked it for 14 nights over the past few months. They flat denied the claim. They said, we're not rebuilding your roof. $80,000's on you. And she said, how can you possibly be denying this claim? This was roof damage. The reason is she violated her insurance contract. She was doing something not permitted in her insurance contract. And to defend the insurance carrier, let's think if that would have been a fire. Well, how does the carrier know that the short-term rental guests don't have kids that mess with the wiring? How do they know that the integrity of the deck is there when they have parties and there's 25 people on a deck? On and on and on. It all comes down to underwriting and the premium being charged. And she didn't notify her insurance company, hey, I'm violating my insurance contract. And that's a tough one because I think the claim should be paid because it had nothing to do with a short-term rental guest. Just like you said with your question. The tree the guest didn't cut the tree down. The tree just fell. It didn't have to do with the rental. But they've been insuring her this whole time, and it's a partnership, and she's violated her insurance contract and not notified her insurance company of a fundamental change in the exposure of the property. If you own a 1,000 square foot house and you're going to put a 500 square foot addition onto your house, what's one of the first things you're going to do? You're going to call your insurance agent and say, hey, I'm adding a room onto my house. Am I covered for this? What's up? What's going on? If you're going to short-term rent your property on Airbnb, you better call your insurance agent, advise them that the exposure at your property is changing. Otherwise, you might be subject to a claim denial on anything.
No, that's really good, Darren. I think that you have to have a level of trust with your agent. Your agent isn't there just to make sure that you're not covered. They want to make sure that you're covered, and that might have to be maybe increasing the policy, maybe charging a little bit more, right?
That's exactly the right answer because insurance is there to protect you, but the carrier needs to charge the appropriate amount of premium for the risk. And no one can argue that by this gal short-term renting her guest house, she did not increase the exposure at her property. So why should they pay for any claim? I mean, you can really argue it both ways, but you have to look at your insurance agent and carrier as a partnership. I mean, I'm paying a premium for coverage, 100%.
Now, going back, because there are hosts and there's a lot more type of unique and creative ways for people to be able to rent out spaces. I'm sure, I don't know if you've heard of like glamping or people renting out Airstreams. How do you get covered? Because I'm sure that car insurance doesn't cover that. So what type of insurance would you need for those types of creative, unique stays?
Yep. And so when we developed our insurance program 4 years ago, it was really designed as a vacation rental program, short-term vacation rentals. And obviously with the growth of Airbnb primarily, we now see a lot of tiny houses that are being put in the backyards of people. We've actually seen a company who makes a custom fit tiny home that slides into your garage. So think of your home and you have a garage facing, they'll have a rental unit that will slide into that garage space that you can now rent out on a short-term basis. And then, as you said, the Airstreams, we see old railroad cars that are put on properties and on and on. And we insure some of them. I can tell you from our perspective, it all just depends on the online listing. And are the owners commingling? Is it a separate space? Do they offer food and these kinds of things? Is there zip lines into a lake? I mean, we look at everything and we get to decide, yes, we will insure this, or no, we won't. But what do they need? They need business insurance. I mean, no different. I mean, at the end of this podcast, really, the whole thing boils down to one question. Is short-term rental activity a business or is it not? And if you say it is, then you need business insurance. I mean, it's as simple as that. The problem, my friend, is you can't call Allstate, Nationwide, USAA, Liberty Mutual, on and on and on, and say, hey, I have a tiny home in my backyard. I live in the main dwelling, and I short-term rent my tiny home on Airbnb. I need a business insurance policy. They go, we don't do it. We don't touch it. We don't want to deal with it. Or they may be appointed with proper insurance. And there are a few other companies that are trying to do what we're doing on a commercial level. Not quite as good a coverage, but, dig it, because that's it. You need business insurance. End of story. Bottom line.
And going off of that, the type of coverage, when would it be a good time for someone to reach out to Proper for a claim? Because Airbnb has their host guarantee up to $1 million. But I'm sure that maybe people are thinking, oh well, they ruined my linens, or they peed on the bed, or they did all this stuff. When is it a good time to rely on your insurance as opposed to Airbnb or some of these insurance companies that cover the in-between?
Yeah, a good question. And all of our policies from a property coverage standpoint have a deductible. The lowest deductible we have is $1,000. And the reason for that is to obviously bring down the cost of the insurance so we don't get $100 insurance claims and have the human element and the payroll and the expense of dealing with $100 insurance claims. So anything under $1,000, there's no coverage anyway. But what I would say, just as an insurance person, anywhere you can find coverage, find coverage. I mean, we get a lot of people who submit claims to the host guarantee and to us. We see it both ways, and why wouldn't you? And a lot of people ask, well, I'm covered by the host guarantee, so why do I need your insurance? And the reality is, if your name's not on it, you should be nervous, because they ultimately can determine what's covered, what's not covered. Things have to be reported under a certain time frame. There's a big news story out about a $1.6 million house that burned down in Napa, California, and it was 16 months, and Airbnb had not responded to them from the host guarantee. And then they finally reached out to NBC Bay Area, got the news story out, and apparently Airbnb stepped up a little bit, and they won't disclose what happened. So I'm not saying the coverage isn't there for sheets and $1,000 claims. But if someone gets drunk and burns your house down, if you think you're going to send Airbnb an email and they're going to rebuild your $1 million house, you're just not that bright. I mean, that's not the way reality works. But it is there, and it's a good second level of protection. But you need insurance with your name on it, because that means you have policy rights and you have a contract that you can ultimately rely on. But bottom line is, anywhere you can submit it, man, submit it. Regardless whether it's $2,000, submit it to us, submit it to your other carrier, submit it to a host guarantee.
Now, what about for hosts that do have like those extra amenities in their home? Let's say they do have like a pool or something. Let's say the guest ruins the pool. They have a party and now they just ruin the pool. How does insurance work when you do have things like that?
Well, I mean, pool depends. How are you going to ruin a pool? It's underground. It's concrete. It's filled with water. We do insure pools, and believe it or not, we actually see some theft of pool pumps in Palm Springs and Nevada and Scottsdale and places where it's hot. So obviously that's covered, theft, property damage. But the pool itself, there's really nothing to cover. I mean that's there's water. So what would be an insurance claim where they ruined the pool? If they destroyed decking around the pool, that would be property coverage. You could file a claim. But there's really not too much from a property standpoint. If there was an earthquake and there was a crack in the pool, that would fall under earth movement insurance. So there's not really too much people can do to a pool, but what you have to be worried about with a pool is liability. The number one thing is people diving into a pool and hitting their head and ultimately injuring themselves. And we underwrite for those. We insure them, but we make all of our clients have depth markers on their pools, just like Hilton. I mean, think when you go to Hilton, there's a sign, lifeguard on duty, not on duty. There's a fence. We don't require fences, but there's depth markers, life safety equipment. So we treat it exactly like that. So if your listeners are out there that have swimming pools with no depth markers or life safety equipment, that needs to be something they put on their checklist. And on our blog at proper.insure, we actually just published a lawsuit that came out that was awarded to a gentleman for $11.6 million in Alabama. So what happened is he got drunk and he dove into a shallow lagoon, and there was no depth marker or no swim at your own risk or warning signs. He's now a paraplegic. He sued the condo association and won $11.6 million. So it's a big deal. When you are offering these amenities, whether it's exercise equipment, swimming pools, hot tubs, saunas are another one. Think of a pregnant woman getting into a sauna. I mean, that's a big deal. You have to have a warning on the outside of your sauna that says, beware of pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, you're open for 10 mil. I mean, pretty much. You can't do it. You got to be smart about it. You got to use your insurance agent as an ally to say, again, here's what I'm doing. Where's my coverage?
Now, I'm gonna start wrapping up. But what are the steps that someone should be taking in order to best protect themselves when they do need to file a claim?
When they need to file an insurance claim?
Right. So let's say there is an incident that happens at the property or with a guest, and I want to get all my ducks in a row. I want to make sure that I'm going to be squared away so that I will be able to be covered. I'm sure that there are ways, things that could happen where maybe you aren't maybe identifying things, or maybe you're not including enough information. But how would you best protect yourself to be able to have a claim go through properly?
Number one, contact your insurance company. That's the very first thing you do. If it's involving theft or significant property damage or something like that, you want to contact the police immediately because you want to get a police report. And if it's a bodily injury claim, you want to do your best to get as much contact information as you can so that your insurance carrier can reach out to the claimant and try to get a statement, because people's stories change a lot over time, and you want to get on that as quickly as possible. So the number one thing is contact your insurance company immediately, and then contact the police, and then preserve the property. So a great example would be if you had some broken windows at your vacation rental, and you go, man, what do I need to do? Number one, call my insurance company. Number two, call the police because my property was vandalized. And number three is put up cardboard and tarps over my windows because I'm trying to preserve my property from future damage. And pull out your insurance policy and Control F, which we all know in PDF is find duties in the event of a loss. Because believe it or not, an insurance policy is a 90-page contract. And this is a great question you asked me, because you actually do have duties in the event of a loss of things that you need to do. Contact your agent, contact the police, and preserve the property in any way possible that's reasonable. And that would be it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Darren. And what's next with Proper? Is there anything that's going to be changing? I know that you're in the U.S. But right now, and you have some hopes to go into Canada, I believe, is what you were saying. But is there anything maybe next that you guys are working on, or looking to improve, or looking to include in your insurance?
Yeah, thank you. And we are looking over the next few years to extend up into Canada because there's a lot of interest. We get a lot of people who are dealing with the same issues with gaps in coverage, and then would be to extend down into the Caribbean. Our product is underwritten by Lloyd's of London, which is very big in the Caribbean anyway, so that would be a natural extension. But truth be told, as any business owner, I mean, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. And we've got such a good thing going here in all 50 states that really for us, it's just maintaining our loss ratios, continuing to grow our book of business. And ultimately, really our goal is to become sort of the Kleenex, if you will, for insurance on short-term rental properties. Whether it's a homeowner, a property manager, rental arbitrage, co-host, just pick up the phone and call us. Our average phone call is 45 minutes. We want to build relationships, educate people. And if we cannot insure you, which a lot of people we can't, we'll give you a lot of good information so at least you can have an understanding of your exposure.
Now, I'm pretty curious, coming from your perspective, where do you see short-term rentals going in the future with Airbnb getting popularity, with the Marriott coming in and they're going to start incorporating their type of the Marriott stays. Where do you see short-term rentals going?
All right, I have not said this on a podcast yet, but I'm going to let you or anyone who wants to steal it. The sharing economy is green. Why is nobody keying in on this? Okay, think about it though. When you look at the United States from space, okay, you see all the lights on the West Coast. You see lights up in the Midwest around Chicago, obviously the East Coast down in Texas and Arizona. It's pretty dark in the middle where I live in Montana. But there's these lights. Now let's have that same overlay, but let's only have the lights on of properties that are unoccupied. There's nobody in them. The map looks exactly the same. So when you look at the carbon footprint or economic footprint of building a home in the Yellowstone Club or Big Sky where I live or Scottsdale or wherever, it's massive. So why are these unoccupied properties not being used? Why are we building big hotels when the inventory is already there? So, I mean, I'm kind of being funny, but at the same time, the sharing economy is very green if you think about it. And it's not going anywhere. I think it's the coolest thing ever, myself included. I mean, the American dream 25 years ago was to, get a house, get married, have kids, and buy a vacation rental. You don't have to buy a vacation rental now. You can buy one as an investment property, or you can just go stay in a short-term rental. It's really the coolest thing ever, and it's going to grow and grow and grow. I'm telling you. And there's no reason not to label it a little green. So I'm just throwing it out there for anybody who wants to steal it. It is a green business.
Yeah, and I know, and that is very hopeful because we have been hearing a lot about regulations. California, Hawaii, they're coming down really hard. Do you have any thoughts about that and how the regulations are expanding?
That's a great way to wrap things up. And I actually just got back from Austin a week ago. I was a speaker at the first ever short-term rental regulation conference held in Austin. It was facilitated by Matt Curtis, the founder of Smart City Policy Group. And he's been all over this. And we had people from all over the nation talking about common sense regulation. And the reality is, the arguments against it don't really hold up. It's a very difficult issue, but in my experience and what I'm seeing is common sense regulation will prevail, and it will be legal in virtually every community in the U.S. Santa Monica is a great example. They banned it, flat banned short-term renting. Well, there's still 3,000 listings on Airbnb in Verbo. So they just drove it underground. They're losing out on all the tax revenue. It just doesn't make sense. But there's the argument of there's noise. The guys at Noise Aware are really good partners of ours, Dave. So they've got that covered. We've got insurance covered. We've got other companies that have safety inspections. You just put common sense regulation in and treat them a little bit like a hotel and as a business, and it's a win-win for everybody. And here's the example that nobody ever talks about. So noise is actually a nuisance. One of the biggest shouting, short-term rentals, my neighbor's parties. Well, would you rather have a neighbor that owns a short-term rental and there's 2 parties a year? Or would you rather have a neighbor with a long-term rental that has college kids move in and party every night? I mean, a study was done in Nashville where they looked at nuisance complaints for garbage, for trash, for noise, and the level is actually much higher for traditional long-term rental properties than short-term rentals. So that argument just doesn't work. But they should be taxed because they need to compete against hotels. It's not fair. Make no mistake, they're taking bookings away from hotels. They should be subject to insurance requirements, tax requirements, safety requirements, and things like that. So we'll get there over the next 5 years. But it's green. I love that. It can be regulated through common sense, and the industry is hot, man. I mean, you know that. It's a really fun industry to be a part of right now.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Darren. That was very optimistic. That is very, very good to hear, especially, for someone like you that you've invested so much into this sharing economy. So hearing your perspective is very enlightening. But thank you so much, Darren. I'll include everything in the show notes, ways to reach out to Proper. I'll include my links down below. And until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting. Hope you hosts benefited from the show. If you found value, please go on over to iTunes, leave us a review, and let us know what you enjoy about the show. If you'd like to talk to hosts that have been featured in these episodes as well as the community, go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation.